Today's rule is a tale of two Congresses. On the one hand, we have the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, which is a bipartisan bill, the result of good faith negotiations between Republicans and Democrats on the House Armed Services Committee to support our service members and provide for our national defense. This NDAA accommodates the diverse interests of members of the House in ways that, while inevitably not satisfying everyone on every point, represent compromises that ensure the bill can become law. But attached to this rule are two nakedly partisan and groundless contempt resolutions based on manufactured allegations, conspiracy theories, and bad faith arguments designed solely to smear President Biden in the lead up to the 2024 election. In the first example, we see Congress at its best. In the second, we see Congress at its worst. First, the NDAA. The fiscal year 2025 NDAA is a solid, bipartisan package designed to support our service members and provide for our national defense. I applaud the work of my colleagues on the Armed Services Committee for their even-handed, bipartisan work to produce a bill that addresses priorities and concerns from all across the country. Like all negotiated bills, there are policies I agree with and disagree with, but that's how negotiation and compromise work. Of particular note is that this year's NDAA would implement long overdue reforms to improve military recruitment and retention, a growing concern as our armed services have struggled to meet recruiting targets over the past decade. The reforms in this bill are the result of an in-depth bipartisan study led by Representatives Don Bacon and Chrissy Houlihan into the factors impacting recruitment and retention. And it should be no surprise that the main concerns facing our service members are the same as those of many American families, wanting to earn enough to support a family and to afford good housing, childcare, and medical care. This NDAA increases pay and benefits for junior service members. It fixes dilapidated military housing. It increases military housing benefits. It fully funds child care assistance programs so that all eligible military families can receive the benefits, and it strengthens programs to support military spouses. It's a disgrace that we have service members living in poverty, and service members and member families who go hungry, service members who aren't able to take care of their children and families. I'm glad that the Armed Services Committee came together on these reforms. They'll go a long way in fighting poverty and hunger, and will encourage more people to enlist in military service. This NDAA also makes significant investments in our national defense. The bill funds a range of programs to support our domestic defense industrial base. These programs will help maintain and create jobs throughout the country and ensure that we can meet the demand for munitions and weapon systems to support our own military needs and those of our allies. Finally, this NDAA makes needed cuts to wasteful defense programs that keep the top-line spending in the bill at a flat 1% increase over last year's amount. All in all, while there are plenty of policies that I disagree with, the overall bill is solid and should garner the support of a large majority of House members. However, despite the best efforts of our armed services colleagues, it looks like House Republican leadership has decided to politicize the NDAA, just as they did last year. Last night in the Rules Committee, Republicans made and ordered dozens of right-wing MAGA amendments that will poison the NDAA's bipartisan support. These amendments, many of which are likely to be adopted by the House's extremist Republican majority, would restrict access to abortion care for female service members and block efforts to promote diversity and address discrimination in our armed services. In doing so, House leadership is once again politicizing one of the few remaining areas of bipartisan agreement in the House, while ignoring the real needs of those who serve our country. Last year, when House Republicans pulled this exact same stunt, it killed bipartisan support for the NDAA for the first time in decades, and this week Republicans have decided to repeat that mistake. Additionally, last night in the Rules Committee, Republicans rejected multiple bipartisan amendments to the bill. Republicans rejected an amendment from a member of their own party to add 4,000 special immigrant visas to resettle our Afghan allies who supported our troops throughout that conflict and who we promised to protect. Republicans rejected another Republican amendment to adopt the Major Richard Starr Act, which would fix a long-standing prohibition that prevents medically retired veterans from receiving their full earned benefits. That's a provision that has the support of over 300 members of this House. Republicans rejected a bipartisan amendment to provide cancer screenings for civilian DoD firefighters who've been disproportionately exposed to cancer-causing PFAS forever chemicals. These screenings would help detect cancers early and save lives. And Republicans rejected an amendment that would ensure that female service members who place their lives on the line for their country would have the freedom to access reproductive health care when they need it. Republicans rejected these sensible amendments, prioritizing over 24 partisan culture war amendments, including amendments to relocate a Confederate monument back to Arlington National Cemetery, and to defund DoD efforts to remove white nationalists from our military. But in rejecting other amendments, our Afghan allies, our veterans, our firefighters, and women service members have to take a back seat to the MAGA extremists' culture wars. That's shameful, it's bad leadership, and it's clear that House Republicans have the wrong priorities for our service members, our veterans, our national security, and our country. Madam Speaker, whereas the NDAA, absent the toxic amendments, represents the possibilities of a functional legislative process and bipartisan negotiation, the rest of this rule represents the worst parts of this chamber. Since the first day of the 118th Congress, Republicans have spent the past year and a half spreading lies and conspiracy theories about President Biden and denying or making excuses for the misdeeds of their presumptive presidential candidate, Mr. Trump. A year and a half of investigations, depositions, written testimony, hundreds of thousands of pages of documents, and they haven't turned up any credible evidence of wrongdoing by President Biden or his administration. In fact, they've conclusively proven what the world knows, that President Biden has not committed impeachable acts. While House Republicans have been confronted repeatedly with this reality, they've doubled down, wasting the time and money of 3 separate congressional committees on a wild goose chase that's turned up exactly 0 evidence of wrongdoing. I want to make sure we understand just how backwards the House Republicans' priorities are. At a time when the nation has been dealing with high costs, devastating national disasters, and wars in Europe and the Middle East, Republicans have wasted tens of millions of taxpayer dollars, thousands of hours of staff time, and weeks of valuable committee and floor time to pursue completely fabricated allegations against this president. And all of their wasted time and money has turned up nothing. Rather than concede defeat, Republicans have manufactured this baseless contempt resolution against the Attorney General. Everything our Republican colleagues are saying about these contempt resolutions is smoke and mirrors, designed to distract attention from the criminal conviction of former President Trump by a jury of his peers, and a desperate attempt by Republicans to save face after their failed investigations, their failed legislative agenda, and their failure to represent the American people. There's no wrongdoing, no crime, no impeachable offense. The President and the Attorney General have done nothing wrong. Madam Speaker, I honestly don't know who's turning into C-SPAN at 9 a.m. on a workday to watch a rules debate, but I guarantee that most Americans could care less about the nonsense we're hearing from the other side of the aisle about this contempt resolution. Americans care about real issues. They care about the prices at the grocery store, access to quality health care and child care, and whether their kids will be safe on the way to and from school. And it's clear that the Republican majority has not done anything to address those issues. Many Republican members have acknowledged as much right here on this floor. House Republicans have wasted a year and a half fighting with each other and falsely smearing President Biden in order to provide cover for the twice-impeached felon who leads their party. They can't even pass their priority bills, and thank God they can't, because their agenda would be disastrous for our civil liberties, our economy, and our national security. So day after day, all we get from House Republicans is messaging, talking points, and a whole lot of hot air. Despite everything, Democrats remain ready to work for the American people. We've stepped into the breach multiple times in the past 18 months to negotiate and cut deals with Republicans to save our economy from default, fund the government, protect our allies, and provide humanitarian aid where it's needed most. We stand ready to advance real solutions for the American people. That offer is always on the table for Republicans who want to take it up. But as these contempt resolutions make clear, House Republicans have shown us time and again that they would rather fight partisan culture wars and stir up chaos and fear than work for the American people. Madam Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.